On my wedding day, 3 rows on my side of the chapel were empty. White chairs, white ribbons, white silence. The ushers had aligned everything perfectly. Programs were placed with military precision. The florist had insisted on symmetry. From the front, the emptiness looked deliberate, almost aesthetic. Only if you counted did you understand. 3 rows. My father's name was printed on the first program, Ryan's on the second, Daniel's on the third. No one sat there. I stood at the back of the aisle with my bouquet resting against my wrist, the stems cool, damp. The organ began its slow progression. The doors opened. Everyone turned. I walked. The silence followed me down the aisle like a second veil. Guests smiled too brightly. A few looked confused. My mother had died years earlier. People had assumed my father would step forward in her place. He did not. Daniel waited at the altar. His expression did not shift when he saw the empty rows. That was one of the reasons I married him. He did not react to spectacle. When I reached him, he leaned slightly closer. "I'm here," he said. It was enough. The ceremony moved forward. Vows spoken, rings exchanged, applause rising in polite, measured waves. Photographs captured angles that excluded the emptiness. No one asked questions. Humiliation, when it is quiet, rarely invites confrontation. It invites speculation. At the reception, the ballroom was arranged in soft gold light, crystal glasses, white linens, controlled luxury. My father respected environments that suggested hierarchy. I had chosen something understated. We had just begun the first dance when the doors at the back opened again. Not dramatically. No crash, no raised voices, just a shift. I felt it before I saw him. My father entered with the posture of a man arriving late on purpose. Behind him walked 2 uniformed police officers. Their expressions were neutral, administrative. Music faltered. Daniel's hand remained at my waist. He did not step away. My father paused long enough to ensure he had attention. He always understood rooms. "There's been a misunderstanding," he announced calmly, projecting without shouting. "My daughter has been involved in financial misconduct tied to federal funds. I've filed a report." The word misconduct settled over the tables like dust. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Forks hovered above plates. Someone near the bar whispered my name as if testing it against the accusation. The officers approached with procedural courtesy. "Emily Carter?" one asked. "Yes." "We need to speak with you privately regarding a complaint that's been filed." I could feel eyes tracing the lines of my dress, searching for signs of guilt. I felt none. I had seen this technique before. Public setting, formal moment, maximum visibility. You disorient the target. You imply legitimacy through uniform and paperwork. I glanced at my father. He did not look at me. He looked at the room. He wanted witnesses. Daniel leaned closer. "Attorney?" he asked quietly. "I have one," I said, because I had learned. We stepped into a side conference room off the ballroom. Neutral walls, a long table, bottled water arranged in identical rows. My father followed. He closed the door behind him. The officer opened a folder. Bank transfer summaries, transaction logs, my name attached to defense-linked accounts. I received documentation alleging unauthorized movement of funds connected to a classified defense program, the officer explained. The complaint includes digital evidence, submitted by Thomas Carter. I studied the pages. The structure was almost elegant. Transfers routed through layered accounts, access points masked through rotating IP addresses, my credentials embedded in approval chains, embedded incorrectly. The timestamps were inconsistent with Navy secure server logs. The authentication signatures had been replicated, not generated. The encryption markers were too uniform. Someone competent had built this, not someone careless. "Do you recognize these transactions?" the officer asked. "I recognize the formatting," I replied. My father's jaw tightened. "Emily," he said, voice controlled. This doesn't have to become something bigger. If there's been a lapse in judgment, there hasn't, I said. I met his eyes then. For a moment, something flickered there. Not doubt, calculation. Years earlier, at Naval Base San Diego, I had learned that expression. It was the look of someone measuring risk. I had been an intelligence analyst assigned to budgetary oversight for a classified initiative known internally as Sable Current. The numbers never frightened me. They told stories. Sable Current's allocations began shifting in subtle increments. Operational funds reclassified as rapid response expenditures. Infrastructure budgets redistributed into contingency channels. On paper, it was defensible. In aggregate, it was wrong. Captain Michael Reed had called me into a briefing room late one evening. Fluorescent lights, no windows. "Sign off on the updated financial assessment," he said, sliding the tablet toward me. The language had been softened, the deviations reframed as tactical necessity. "These figures don't reconcile with procurement records," I said. He rested both hands on the table. "You're overanalyzing. We're aligned on strategic objectives." "I'm aligned with verifiable data." Silence stretched, his voice lowered. "Loyalty matters, Analyst Carter." "So does accuracy." I did not sign. From that point forward, my assignments narrowed. Meetings proceeded without me. Performance evaluations adopted careful phrasing, rigid, insufficiently adaptive, no threats, no overt retaliation, just isolation. I transferred 6 months later under administrative reassignment. I archived everything, every draft, every revision, every metadata log, digital signatures, access timestamps, internal correspondence. When you refuse to authorize something powerful people expect you to authorize, you document. Back in the conference room at my wedding, I traced one of the transaction chains with my finger. "These access points originate from civilian subcontractor servers," I said, "not naval secure networks." The officer looked up. My father remained silent. "Who has access to your credentials?" the officer asked. "No one," I said. "But my brothers have advanced network capabilities and financial authorization within defense contracting systems." My father's composure thinned. "That's an outrageous accusation." "It's not an accusation," I replied. "It's a request for forensic audit." I turned to the officer. "I formally request a federal-level digital review of this documentation, including metadata verification and cross-reference with naval authentication logs. I will provide prior archive materials from Sable Current for comparison." The room shifted. The officer nodded slowly. "That can be arranged." My father stepped closer. "You're making this worse." "No," I said. "You already did." We returned to the ballroom. Music resumed in fragments. Guests pretended relief. The cake was cut. Photographers repositioned people strategically. Humiliation is less powerful when you refuse to supply emotion. I moved through the reception as planned, thanked guests, accepted congratulations, danced once more. My father left before dessert. He did not say goodbye. Late that night, after the venue cleared and the silence settled, I sat at the small desk in the hotel suite. Daniel slept in the adjoining room. He trusted me to handle what needed handling. I opened my encrypted archive. Sable Current, version histories, digital signatures, the discrepancies that had cost me my position. Now my name was attached to embezzlement. That was not coincidence. My father would not risk public spectacle without assurance, which meant he believed protection existed somewhere above him. Power does not move unless it feels insulated. I drafted 3 messages, one to my attorney, initiating independent forensic analysis, one to an oversight contact in Pearl Harbor, requesting formal review of Sable Current's historical financial structure, and one to Commander Brooke Chavez. If they intended this to unfold publicly, I would let it, but not in a ballroom, in a courtroom. War does not begin with shouting. It begins with paperwork, and this time, I would not be alone when the documents were opened. The courtroom in Pearl Harbor was colder than it needed to be. Fluorescent lights, No windows, wood polished to a restrained shine. The seal behind the judge's bench carried more weight than any raised voice ever could. I stood when my name was called, not as a defendant, as a witness. The internal review into Sable Current had moved faster than expected once my wedding incident triggered federal oversight. Digital forensics opened doors that had been sealed for years. Patterns emerged. Money moved in circles that were too symmetrical to be accidental. Commander Brooke Chavez stood at the prosecution table. She did not waste words. Her uniform was precise, her posture more so. When she looked at someone, they felt measured. Across the room sat Elias Ramirez, civilian contractor, financial liaison to Sable Current during its restructuring phase, polished, confident, the kind of man who believed documentation could always be revised. Captain Michael Reed was not present, officially reassigned months earlier, unavailable, but his signature was everywhere. I took the oath. My father sat 3 rows back. He had come, not to support me, to observe. His expression was composed, as if he were evaluating an investment. Chavez began with structure. For the record, analyst Emily Carter served in budgetary intelligence oversight for Project Sable Current between 2016 and 2018. Is that correct? Yes. During that time, did you identify discrepancies in the allocation of defense funds? I did. She moved deliberately, laying foundation before implication. Please describe the nature of those discrepancies. I did not dramatize. Operational funds were reclassified under emergency procurement codes without corresponding mission authorization. Procurement totals exceeded equipment deployment records. Digital authentication markers indicated revision layering rather than primary authorization. Ramirez shifted slightly. Chavez turned toward him. Mr. Ramirez, you certified those reallocations as compliant, correct? He adjusted his tie. Based on the information provided to me at the time, yes. Chavez nodded once. And you maintain under oath that the certifications were accurate? Yes. Silence held. Then she said it. Elias Ramirez, you lied. The words were not loud. They did not need to be. A murmur rippled through the observers section. Behind me, a voice hissed quietly. Don't you dare. I did not turn. I knew the voice. My father. The judge struck the gavel lightly. Order. Chavez continued. Commander Carter, during your tenure, were you pressured to approve financial summaries you believed were inaccurate? Yes. By whom? Captain Michael Reed. The name landed. Ramirez's composure thinned. Chavez projected a series of digital exhibits onto the screen behind us. Metadata logs, authentication timestamps, IP origin comparisons. Please explain what we're seeing. The highlighted fields show layered digital signatures, I said. The authentication key sequence differs from Naval Secure Server standards. These entries were edited post-certification. Edited by whom? Chavez asked. I cannot identify the individual without full access logs, I replied, but the origin servers correspond to subcontractor systems linked to Ramirez Financial Consulting. Ramirez's attorney objected. The judge allowed limited continuation. Chavez adjusted her strategy. After your refusal to sign the revised assessment, what occurred? My access to briefings was reduced. Performance evaluations changed. I was administratively transferred. Did you document your findings? Yes. Have you provided that documentation to this court? I have. She paused, then turned slightly toward the back of the room. Commander Carter, are you aware of allegations filed against you regarding financial misconduct? Yes. Who filed them? My father. A subtle shift. Chavez did not react emotionally. Are you aware of any legitimate basis for those allegations? No. She approached the evidence screen again. These transaction chains, she said, were used to implicate you in unauthorized movement of defense funds. Our forensic review indicates that the embedded authentication markers were replicated using civilian network pathways. She let the implication breathe. Commander Carter, do you possess the technical capability to generate those civilian access pathways from within naval secure systems? No. Do your brothers, Ryan and Daniel Carter, hold cybersecurity and financial systems positions within defense subcontracting? Yes. The room tightened. Ramirez leaned forward suddenly. This is absurd. I had no involvement with her family. Chavez did not look at him. Mr. Ramirez, a contractor under your program testified this morning that external IP addresses used to construct the fraudulent transaction trail were leased through shell accounts connected to your firm. His jaw flexed. That contractor was terminated. For whistleblowing, Chavez said calmly. The judge intervened to maintain order. Evidence was submitted, screens refreshed, digital signatures expanded to microscopic detail. Timestamp sequences revealed irregularities measured in milliseconds. Facts do not raise their voices, they accumulate. An expert forensic analyst testified next, calm, clinical. The metadata indicates post hoc manipulation, he explained. The digital signatures attached to Commander Carter's credentials were overlaid rather than generated within secure naval authentication environments. The probability of internal origin is statistically negligible. The judge leaned forward. So the accused could not have produced these entries from her assigned terminal? Correct. Chavez rested her hands lightly on the table. Furthermore, financial redistribution under Sable Current coincided with unauthorized contractor bonus dispersals totaling $42 million. Gasps were softer now, controlled. Ramirez stared straight ahead. My father shifted in his seat. Chavez approached the final sequence. Commander Carter, when your father filed allegations against you, were you aware that Sable Current was under renewed audit? Yes. Do you believe the timing was coincidental? No. She let that sit. Your Honor, Chavez concluded, the evidence demonstrates a coordinated attempt to redirect scrutiny away from systemic embezzlement by constructing a fraudulent narrative targeting a former analyst who refused to authorize falsified reports. Silence. Not the polite kind, the structural kind. Ramirez's attorney requested recess, denied. The judge reviewed the compiled exhibits. When he spoke, his voice was measured. The allegations against Commander Emily Carter are dismissed effective immediately. The evidence supports referral of this matter for federal criminal investigation into potential embezzlement and obstruction. A subtle intake of breath moved through the room. No applause, just recalibration. Ramirez's shoulders lowered for the first time. My father did not move. I did not look at him. The hearing adjourned without spectacle. Outside the courtroom, cameras waited. I did not stop for them. Commander Chavez walked beside me down the corridor. You understood this would escalate, she said. Yes. Most people don't testify when they're told not to. I considered that. Most people aren't prepared. She allowed the smallest hint of acknowledgement. Behind us, federal agents moved toward Ramirez. The system had begun to turn, not because of outrage, because of documentation. As I stepped outside into the Pearl Harbor sun, I felt neither triumph nor relief, just distance. War, when it is procedural, ends without noise. My phone vibrated once. A message from my father. We need to talk. I did not respond. Some conversations are no longer strategic, and I had already said everything that mattered under oath. The federal referral did not make headlines immediately. It moved quietly. Subpoenas were issued, servers mirrored, hard drives imaged, contractors interviewed without warning. 3 weeks after Pearl Harbor, 2 agents arrived at my apartment with a request, not a demand. Commander Carter, we need access to any archived materials related to Sable Current that were not previously submitted. I had prepared for that. I handed them an encrypted drive. They did not ask how long I had been waiting for this moment. They did not ask why I had kept copies beyond what protocol required. They only asked for passwords. While the investigation expanded, something else began to surface. Financial anomalies tied not just to Ramirez's firm, but to secondary routing accounts. Accounts that had been used to construct the fraudulent transaction trail bearing my name. Civilian IP clusters, shell entities, offshore routing attempts that failed in small technical ways, patterns. One afternoon my attorney called. They've traced a leasing agreement for several of the external servers used in the falsified documentation. I waited. The accounts were opened through a digital brokerage firm in Virginia. The guarantors were Ryan Carter and Daniel Carter. The words did not shock me. They confirmed structure. My brothers had not acted alone. They lacked motive at that scale. But they had skill and proximity. I asked for the timeline. Server leases initiated 2 weeks after the internal Sable Current audit reopened, my attorney said, 3 days before your wedding. I pictured the empty rows. They had already known what they were building. The wedding interruption had not been impulsive. It had been synchronized. 2 days later, I was summoned to a secondary federal hearing in San Diego. Not public, not televised, a procedural examination. Ryan sat across from me at a long table. He looked smaller without casual confidence. Daniel avoided eye contact entirely. Their legal counsel spoke first. My clients maintain that any server leasing was conducted as part of independent cybersecurity research. There is no evidence they constructed falsified financial trails. An agent placed printed metadata on the table. Digital signature layering protocols found in the manipulated transaction logs match proprietary code previously registered under Ryan Carter's cybersecurity firm. Silence. Ryan exhaled through his nose. That code was licensed to multiple entities, none of which, the agent replied, had access to Commander Carter's authentication structure. Daniel shifted. You don't understand how these systems interact, he said finally. I looked at him. I do, I replied. The hearing continued for 4 hours. Bit by bit, structure replaced denial. Server timestamps aligned with my wedding reception. IP masking errors revealed domestic origin points. A financial consultant formerly contracted under Ramirez testified remotely that he had been instructed to create narrative insulation in case of audit escalation. Narrative insulation? The examiner asked. A scapegoat trail, he said. No one looked at me when he said it. They did not need to. When the session recessed, my brothers were escorted to separate rooms. I stepped into the hallway. My father was there. He stood near a window overlooking the harbor. For the first time in my life, he looked uncertain in a public building. This went too far, he said. I studied him. You brought police to my wedding. His jaw tightened. I was told it would pressure you into cooperating quietly. With whom? He hesitated. With people who assured me you had compromised sensitive material. They said if you admitted limited involvement, the rest could be managed. Managed, I repeated. They said the program needed protection, that you were rigid, that you didn't understand larger strategy. Did you? He did not answer. I watched the ships in the harbor move in disciplined lines. You filed a criminal complaint against your own daughter, I said, based on assurances from contractors under federal audit. He swallowed once. They told me it would protect the family. I let that settle. Protection, in his vocabulary, had always meant control. Your sons leased the servers, I said evenly. His eyes flickered. I didn't know details, but you knew enough. He did not deny it. In the resumed session, digital forensics finalized what instinct had already outlined. Metadata confirmed layered edits using civilian pathways. Financial redirection under Sable Current had produced $42 million in unauthorized contractor dispersals. The fabricated trail attached to my credentials had been constructed after the audit reopened. The judge overseeing the federal referral issued immediate warrants for conspiracy to commit fraud, obstruction of a federal investigation, and fabrication of evidence. Ryan's composure fractured first. "This was never supposed to touch her," he said quietly. It was not a confession. It was admission of strategy. Daniel said nothing. My father was not arrested that day. His involvement had been advisory, not technical, but obstruction is not limited to code. 2 weeks later, a federal grand jury indicted Elias Ramirez and 3 associated contractors. Ryan and Daniel were named as co-conspirators in evidence fabrication. My father received notice of investigation for filing knowingly false criminal allegations in coordination with parties under audit. The system moved without emotion: subpoenas, asset freezes, travel restrictions, public statements framed in careful language. I was fully cleared. Officially. No asterisk, no internal notation. When the press release was issued, it was brief. Commander Emily Carter exonerated of all allegations. Evidence confirms coordinated attempt to fabricate financial misconduct charges in connection with federal defense investigation. Daniel read it twice. We did not celebrate. 3 months later, I stood at a podium inside the Naval Academy auditorium. Rows filled, no empty seats. Midshipmen waited in silence. I administered the oath. Their voices rose together, steady and untested. As I spoke the final line, I felt something settle into clarity. I had not chosen the family I was born into, but I had chosen the discipline that shaped me. After the ceremony, Commander Chavez approached quietly. "They're requesting sentencing recommendations next month," she said. "For Ramirez? For all of them." I nodded once. "I'll submit documentation." She studied me. "You don't seem angry." "I'm not." Anger wastes precision. That evening, I stood alone on the academy grounds overlooking the water. The horizon was calm. My phone vibrated once. A message from my father. No words, just my name. I did not respond. Some relationships collapse under pressure. Some reveal what they always were. If someone ever leans close again and whispers, "Don't you dare," I will still tell the truth. Quietly, precisely. And I will let systems do the rest. The courtroom was quieter during sentencing. No cameras this time, no speculation, just record. Elias Ramirez stood first. His suit was darker than before, less polished. He kept his hands folded as if still presenting numbers. The prosecutor outlined the structure again. $42 million redirected through layered allocations under Sable Current. Internal audits suppressed. Authentication trails manipulated. He did not look at me. When the judge pronounced sentence, federal prison, restitution, permanent disqualification from defense contracting, Ramirez nodded once, as if acknowledging an unfavorable contract term. Power leaving a room is rarely loud. It just shifts. Ryan and Daniel stood next. My brothers had always filled space differently. Ryan with confidence, Daniel with calculation. Now they stood smaller. The charges against them were precise. Conspiracy to fabricate digital evidence, obstruction of a federal investigation, construction of fraudulent financial trails designed to implicate a federal officer. The judge reviewed the metadata one final time. "Your technical competence was not in question," he said evenly. "Your judgment was." Ryan glanced at me once. Not apology, assessment. Daniel kept his eyes on the table. Their sentences were lighter than Ramirez's, but not symbolic. Federal supervision, financial penalties, revocation of defense-related licenses, years of monitored restrictions. The courtroom did not react. Families of defendants often cry during sentencing. Ours did not. My father sat behind them. He had not been charged with conspiracy. His liability was procedural, knowingly filing false allegations, coordinating with parties under audit, attempting to influence testimony. His attorney had negotiated carefully: probation, fines, public censure. He stood when addressed. For the first time in my memory, his voice lacked command. "Yes, Your Honor." No argument, no performance. The judge's final statement was brief. This court finds that institutional integrity was compromised by individuals who believed narrative control outweighed factual accountability. It did not. Gavel. Adjourned. Outside the courthouse, the sky was overcast. Reporters remained behind barricades. They called my name once. I did not stop. Daniel walked beside me to the car. "Do you want to say anything publicly?" he asked. "No," because the record already existed. Later that evening, my father requested to meet. Not at home, not in public, at a small diner near the harbor where conversations are absorbed by the sound of cutlery. I arrived on time. He was already seated, coffee untouched. He looked older than he had months earlier, not frail, reduced. "You could have let this settle quietly," he said without preamble. I took the seat across from him. "You brought police to my wedding." He inhaled slowly. "I was told it would pressure you into admitting minor involvement, that the rest could be contained." "Contained," I repeated. He stared at his hands. "They said you were rigid, that you didn't understand the scale of what was at stake, that protecting the program required sacrifice." "Whose sacrifice?" He did not answer. Silence stretched between us. The waitress approached, poured coffee, left without asking questions. "You trusted them," I said. "I trusted the system," he replied. "You trusted authority." His jaw tightened. "I spent my life building stability," he said. "I wasn't going to let you tear it down over accounting discrepancies." "They weren't discrepancies." He looked up at me then. For a moment, I saw the calculation again, the instinct to reposition. It faded. "You always were stubborn," he said quietly. "I was accurate." He studied me as if trying to locate the version of me he believed he could still manage. "She said under oath that you refused to sign," he said finally. "Chavez." "Yes." "You knew what would happen." "Yes." "And you did it anyway." "Yes." The diner noise continued around us. Forks against ceramic. Low conversations. "You chose the institution over your family," he said. "No," I replied. "I chose the truth over control." That landed. He sat back. "I thought protecting the family meant protecting reputation." "It doesn't." He looked down at the table again. "What does it mean?" I considered the question. "It means not sacrificing someone to maintain power." He did not respond. The waitress returned with the bill. He reached for it automatically. I stopped him. "I'll pay." It was not symbolic. It was precise. He hesitated, then withdrew his hand. We stood at the same time. At the door, he spoke once more. "I never thought you'd take it this far." "I never thought you would." Outside, the harbor wind cut clean across the pavement. He remained on the sidewalk. I walked to my car. Distance restored itself naturally. Weeks later, I received formal notice that the federal investigation into Sable Current had expanded beyond Ramirez. Oversight protocols were revised, contractor screening intensified, budgetary audits automated through layered authentication safeguards. Institutional correction rarely makes headlines. It changes structure quietly. I returned to work. My role shifted to advisory oversight on digital authentication integrity. I did not request it. It was assigned. One afternoon, I stood again in the Naval Academy auditorium. Another oath ceremony. Another class of officers raising their right hands. The words were identical. The context was not. When I finished administering the oath, a young midshipman approached. "Commander," she said, "is it true you testified against your own chain of command?" "Yes." She held my gaze. "Were you afraid?" "No." That was not entirely accurate. Fear had existed. It simply had not dictated action. She nodded once. "Thank you." I walked out of the auditorium into clear afternoon light. My phone remained silent. No more messages from my father. No attempts at negotiation. Systems had completed their work. What remained was choice. I could not choose the family I was born into. I could choose the discipline I carried forward. If someone ever leaned close again and whispered, "Don't you dare," I would still testify. I would still document. I would still allow facts to dismantle narrative. Quietly, precisely, without spectacle. And then I would step back, distance intact.